fact that I haven't styled my hair or anything yet.
Well, I have hair. Like
There you
my
go.
family's been like, teasing me, like, because usually I keep it like basically shaved,
Yeah.
and like my daughter will come up to me and she'll be like, "You've got hair and you can't cut it."
Well, yep.
Yeah. So Shayne Silvers, welcome to the Fearless Storyteller podcast.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and before I hit the record button, we were talking about like checking in how we're doing with this whole extraordinary time as we record this. It's May 13th, and we're in the midst of lockdown for many of us. So, yeah, well, first of all, for people who don't know who you are, let's frame this. What do you want to share about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm an urban fantasy author. I
Mm.
write, I think I've got 4 different series now. The main claim to fame is the Nate Temple series, and that's about a billionaire wizard in St. Louis he's kind of a jerk, and he's intentionally written that way. He's kind of like Iron Man, where he's
Yeah.
very narcissistic, and he's got a lot of room to grow. And that was kind of the intent, is that I wanted to take someone who had pretty much whatever most people want, money, fame, whatever it is,
Yeah.
and then slowly whittle that away to the point that he realizes none of that really matters.
Mm.
And that, you have to have character behind that. You have to have morals and virtues. And so little by little, he kind of gets, knocked on his butt. And he has to kind of find a way to claws way back to, a more virtuous person and more of a hero, or
Right.
as much of a hero as he can be, which is less than most people can be. So
Yeah, and
definitely, go ahead.
I'm just curious in that whole thing, because I'm writing an anti-hero story now, but it's not the first thing I've written, and emotionally it's got a different quality to it.
Very different.
Right? And for Nate Temple, was that your first thing you wrote?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
First thing I wrote. And I saw so many characters out there that were, they're poor, or they've got a job that they hate, or they're just kind of already down on their butt, and their whole goal is to try to get up to the top. And so I said, well, what if I did something different, where I started with someone who had it all, and then I knock them on their butt and try to have them come back to the top a different way. And so, yeah, that was my first stab. And I always find more benefits and more enjoyment from reading about a person who's got obvious flaws, as opposed to like a Frodo Baggins type that's just a perfectly sweet guy, and he gets thrust into a dangerous situation. That's fun, but it just wasn't for me.
Right. As a reader, you're talking about.
Yeah. And I guess as a writer too, I've entertained, bigger stories like that I could write, and I've got outlines for something if I wanted to try that. But I just personally find more enjoyment from the anti-hero type.
Right. And so when you started, were you thinking about how it would be received and if it would be successful and find an audience and all those things?
Yeah. So when I first wrote it, I thought that I would be able to sell it to New York, and become an instant success.
Of course.
And it didn't work, obviously. But I've always had an overly healthy ego, even if it was justified or not justified. I would just lie to myself if it wasn't. And so I always told myself I had, goal cards that I wrote, that I read every single day out loud. And I would tell myself, you are a 6-figure author. You are one of the top fantasy authors in the world. And when you walk in a room, people know who you are. And so I would tell myself these lies every single day, as I'm putting on my tie for the bank job. And I was making maybe $7 a month in royalties from my book sales. So it was a blatant lie. And there was no end in sight. There was no, opportunity that it was going to work. And then I started looking into the more, the business side of being an author, and the marketing and emails, and that's what really turned it around. So before that, I spent about 3 years just waiting for someone else to find it.
Yeah. So you didn't ever question like, hey, maybe this isn't a good book, or this doesn't work for readers?
No, and I knew it would. So let me back up. So I knew that there would be plenty of readers that didn't like it. I'm writing about a character.
That's an important distinction. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm writing about a character that is very unlikable. And so I knew that would always be the case, but I never let myself use that excuse. Because no matter what you write, there's going to be someone or a group of people out there that don't like what you do. And so get over yourself and move
Yeah.
on. And so as an author, get over yourself and move on and stop giving yourself excuses and keep going. And
Yeah.
so I always knew there would be some kind of obstacle and probably multiple obstacles, but I never focused on those. And that was the point of those goal cards.
Yeah. And when did you like transition from like, you know, there's the mantra cards, the lies that you tell yourself every morning that keep you going. Like, at what point in the process did you feel like that was backed up in some way by data you were seeing or feedback you were getting?
Yes. So the cool thing about these goal cards, and I tell everyone about them, is because you, whether you realize it or not, you're either going to be doing those goal cards or you're going to be subconsciously giving yourself, like you were saying, negative. You're never going to make it. You only make $7 a month in sales. So in the back of your mind, you're always going to be having those thoughts. So the whole point of these goal cards is to counteract those.
Yeah.
And so if you don't fill yourself with positive lies, you're going to fill your head with negative lies.
Yeah.
So I started just counteracting my psyche, I guess.
Yeah.
So it wasn't till much later that I started noticing success, but I did notice that my confidence would grow, and I'd get more just better at storytelling and more focused and more motivated and less tired. And the lies, if anything, just helped me persevere, and that's really cool.
Yeah. And I want to stay for a moment kind of like in this early phase for you, because for a lot of us, that's what's relatable, especially for aspiring authors versus mid-career authors, right? Like there's a day job, there's family, there's commitments, there's not really a lot of me time to even get my head on straight, let alone write a story consistently. And so like, what were you dealing with when you're like leading up to writing this book, and why did you even write in the first place?
Yeah, so one of the things on my goal cards was that J.K. Rowling, she wrote her books on like napkins and stuff like that. She was raising kids and living on the equivalent of food stamps, and at least to my knowledge, she was on some kind of welfare, and so she was in really tough straits. And so I had that on my goal cards, like if she can do it, why can't I? And so my struggles, that I had in my way were, I was getting a college degree at first. So I was, doing that 16 hours a semester. And then I was working full time at a bank, and I was getting married. And as the years go by, I got the degree and I had to get a real, big boy job at a bank. And then we were having kids. And so there was always something going on. I never had, free time. Whenever I did have free time, I mean, for probably 3 years, I didn't watch any TV, any shows, really didn't do any enjoyment reading at all. I went to the occasional movie, blockbuster, like a Marvel movie or something. But I was literally working about 20 hours a day. And so I'd wake up at about 5 a.m. and I would write or do marketing or emails. Sorry, I've got a dog here that wants to be part of the show.
Cool. What's the dog's name?
Her name is Freya.
Hey, Freya. Yeah. Does Freya ignore digital devices like other animals do?
She loves attention, so she's not understanding who I'm talking to right now. She thinks I'm going crazy. But yeah, so at about 5 a.m. I'd wake up, 4:30 or 5, and I actually set my alarm clocks on my phone to say Jim Butcher is already writing. J.K. Rowling already published her second book, whatever it was. Like I would have these little things on my alarm, so when it goes off, that's the first thing I read. And so I jumped out of bed and I'd work from 5 to 7, just on the book or whatever it was, and then I would go to work from 8 to 5. And on my lunch breaks, I'd bring my laptop every day. I'd go find a park or a coffee shop. I'd go write. Then I'd get home, spend 2 hours with the kids and the wife, and then I'd go right back into writing till midnight too. So basically my schedule was 4 hours of sleep for about 18 to 24 months.
Yeah. And so on the one hand, that's really an inspiring like tale, right? You found a role model and you realized that anybody can do it. And so you can do it. And did burning the candle at both ends like that take a toll?
No, I mean, I'm sure it did, you know,
Yeah.
it has, it has to some extent,
Yeah.
but I never let myself, that was another reason for those goal cards, is because to do something like that, you have to be, crazy. You have to be committed. You have to
Mm.
be beyond committed. And so those goal cards were to help push me and not say, oh, you're tired. You've been working really hard the last 2 weeks. Take a break. I
Yeah.
couldn't afford that, because if I did take a break, um, I'd stop. You know what I mean? Just keep going, keep the bus
Yeah.
moving. You take a break and slow down, you're gonna have to start all over again. So,
Yeah. And how did you come across this idea of goal cards?
I can't really remember. I've always been a student of self-help, and so I
Mm-hmm.
was always reading, Napoleon Hill, Dale Carnegie, different business people. I've always been interested in that, just the human psychology, and that's something that I put in my books a lot. Is in the characters, is I really focus on the psychological impacts of a lot of the things that happen, and
Yeah.
how they make their own problems a lot of times.
Yeah.
And so I've always been fascinated with that. And so on a personal level, I've been doing that for years, just with my career or school or, romance, love life, family, everything. So I've always
Mm-hmm.
had parts.
Cool. And
Yeah.
that it requires a certain commitment and energy to
Yeah.
self, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we're not flawless, and it takes some admitting that and
Yep.
living in
Absolutely.
discomfort.
Yes. You have to make yourself uncomfortable.
Yeah. And so in your invitation to prospective readers, you have this invitation that to join your readers group because we are freaks. And so I'm
Yes.
wondering, what does that mean to you?
So I've always noticed that some of the most interesting people I've ever met are just the free thinkers and the wild at heart people, and the people that most people just kind of look over,
Mm.
or say, oh yeah, they're a fantasy nerd, or they're a D&D gamer, or they like Magic the Gathering, or whatever. They just kind of shrug them off with whatever label.
Hmm.
And I've always found that if you break through the barrier and talk to those people, they're some of the smartest people and just most interesting people that you can talk to.
Yeah.
And I was obviously coming from a banking world where it's all, pressed white collars and ties and suits, and
Yeah.
everyone's very stuffy, and it's who you know and who you played golf with and all this. And I never really cared for that. And so I thought it'd be cool to kind of make a clubhouse essentially for freaks,
Yeah.
to go back and have fun reading.
So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but in that world, maybe you felt like a little bit of a misfit.
Yeah.
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 And
I love the misfits.
yeah.
My
And do
favorite.
you feel that way being in the indie author community?
Yeah,
Do you feel
absolutely.
like a misfit in that community though? Or,
Yeah, I always love being the underdog, and I love the
mm,
fact that indies are taking over.
yeah.
And yeah, I've always loved the underdog. So maybe that's another reason.
Yeah. And so I know for like in past podcast interviews I've heard with you, there's this moment of transition from when you were struggling to sell books, right,
Uh-huh.
to finding some commercial success. And I suppose for people who haven't heard that, we should touch on that.
Okay,
But I have some questions following that, maybe.
works.
Yeah.
Yes, I'll real brief. I spent probably, I think I published Obsidian Sun in 2012, and then I wrote the sequel in 2015.
Mm.
So I was finishing up school and just life stuff in the way. And so 2015 is when I really said, okay, well, if you're gonna do this, do it. Give it your everything for 12 to 18 months. And if you fail, that's fine. You've got a nice job, go do that. But at least give it everything you have, and then you can just put it on a shelf if it doesn't work,
Mm.
figuratively speaking, but pun intended. So I spent about 6 months, maybe 7 months, looking into the marketing side and how to go about that. There's a course with Mark Dawson at the time, who had an advertising for authors course. And he just kind of really put it into perspective that indie authors, it's not just writing, it's a business. And I have a business degree. And so as soon as I really thought about that, I said, I'm an idiot. I could have done this 3 years ago. This is what my job is. But I never really thought of it being that I would have to be a business owner as well as a writer.
Yeah.
As soon as I did, it started to make perfect sense. And so I spent about 6 months kind of going through his courses and just understanding the marketing and the advertising and emails and all that stuff. And then I set all that up, and within I think the first 6 weeks after I started really treating it like a business and having all those things in place, I think I had my first $700 month. Within the first month was the first $700 month, and then the second month was $1,700, and then it was $17,000 the month after that, and then it just kept going exponentially.
Yeah, and some people, I think, especially those who haven't been on the inside, say, of that course, or really been thinking about the business for a while, might hear that and go, okay, so I learned business, because we all hear we need to learn business, right? And then you shot up the charts. And oftentimes maybe what we're missing is understanding what we're supposed to be measuring to tell if we're successful or not.
Yeah.
Right. And part of that is what we're spending, how we're spending it, but also the metrics we're seeing.
Yeah.
Right.
So in my case, I started out, I had no money, no free money anyway. And so I had to cash in my retirement account to fund all of this stuff. And I didn't tell my wife about that. It's okay. I'm safe now because I made up for it.
Right.
It could have gone very bad.
Yeah.
But I cashed in my 401k to fund this. And I only had $5 a day to spend on ads. That was a stretch too. And so I really had to focus on what was my goal. It wasn't necessarily to make 6 figures a month. I didn't necessarily believe that was possible.
Yeah.
And so what I would look at is the number of super fans, because I figured if I can get one super fan, it's worth 10 or 100 passive fans. And so I really started focusing on interacting with every comment that came through on an ad. And I would really personally get involved, not just thanks, but like, hey, what was your favorite part? Or, how is this different from other books you love? Or, I would really engage them in a conversation, open-ended questions. And that's what really kind of set the fire, is that these readers were so unused to that an author would actually care about what they think or what they say, or that they would even comment or reply or even like their comment. And so I really focused on just building the super fans and really showing the readers that, hey, I'm not just here to sell you a book. I'm here to, talk to you and hang out with you.
Right.
So that's how I kind of measured my engagement. And it was, of course, I would look at metrics, sales numbers, but I was more focused on that engagement. And that's what kept me up most hours.
Yeah.
I'd be on Facebook for 4 or 5, 6 hours, commenting and liking and searching my name and seeing if I missed anyone. And I'd have Google alerts and all this stuff for any time anyone popped my name onto a post or a comment. And I would go find them and hunt them down and respond, negative or positive. And I would just engage them. And so that was kind of my metric, and the sales moved according with that engagement.
Right.
So.
Right. And you probably learned this in the course, and so maybe it wasn't a surprise for you. But like, if you were seeing, like, so one, there's what you're spending, there's what you're making, and you've got cash flow, and you've got engagement, and you're cultivating an audience to connect with, and that probably felt really good.
Yeah.
Right. Like, did question ever come up, like when you thought about scaling up how much you were spending? Like,
it was terrifying.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the $5 a day was a stretch, because as a banker, I would say, okay, well, 30 days in a month times 5, that's $150 that I don't have.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get paid from these sales till 90 days later anyway.
Yeah.
So I don't have this money. And so, sorry, some kind of dog or mailman or something. Yeah, exactly. But essentially I would look at these sales and say, okay, yeah, everything's supposedly going great. I don't have the money yet. And then a friend of mine, John Logston, he's another author. He's actually the founder of Reader Links.
Okay.
Exceptional guy. He's the one who looked at my numbers and said, you idiot, double your spend. Like, these numbers are ridiculous.
Yeah.
And, well, I don't have the money yet. Like, I haven't actually made any of this. And he said, you should triple it, not double it. And then so he kind of pushed me over the ledge.
I asked because, well, one, a lot of people struggle with this, right? Because there's this idea of that resists, like, okay, so I'm spending $5 a day. I can see that, although I can't necessarily measure correlation great, like that maybe I'm making $10 a day, $15 a day, right?
Yep.
And it's like, well, I should wait for that money to come back, right? And
so my thought was, if I know that money's coming in, I can pay off the debt, essentially, because that's what you're committing to, is a debt of $5 a day or $10 a day. And so I looked at it as, okay, I don't have that money yet, but I have that money. Yeah. And so I'm going to reinvest 100%, essentially, of what I'm supposedly making on, Book Report or KDP. It shows me I made $100 in sales. So let's put that $100 immediately back into advertising to boost posts. And so I never took a penny of the money that I was, making until 6 months later, 7 months later. Yeah. So, I was at the point where I was hitting, mid 5 figures a month, and I wasn't doing anything for myself. Yeah. I wasn't paying myself. I was just still going to work, and still putting it right back into advertising or new book covers or audio, so I never treated it as real money, because I wanted it to be a lifestyle, not, a new watch or something silly like that. And so I didn't pay off debts. I didn't do anything. I treated it like it wasn't really there. And it was almost like a video game where you just reinvent it and try to make your character stronger, but you don't actually get anything from it. And so, so it made that easier, because I didn't treat it like real money. So it was easier to reinvest it into more advertising or whatever.
Yeah. And so when you listened to John Logsdon and you tripled your budget, like, were you like freaking out? Like,
yeah, I was, but at the same time, I was terrified. We're talking about money that I don't have that kind of money, in my career. I didn't have that kind of money to just throw away on Facebook advertising, of all things. And so it was terrifying. But if you think about it, if it started blowing up or not blowing up, you can reduce it the next day or 2 days later. And so you're not really committing to, $900. You're committing to $30 or whatever it's a day. You're just committing to the daily spend.
Yeah. Although I imagine, like, it could come up, you might hit like statistically a slow cycle for a couple of days. I could see where it would be tempting to pull the plug.
And that's why I looked at the accrued earnings that I've made over the past 6 weeks, 8 weeks. And I'd say, okay, well, my budget is, I've got $20,000 that's sitting there in monopoly money that I can put in advertising. So let's do it. It's not real money anyway. Let's just do it. Yeah. And so it just made it a lot easier. If you detach yourself from the money and just look at it as a monopoly game or something else, you make smarter decisions. You're not emotionally affecting it anymore.
Yeah. And so you're 5 years into that process, and I imagine your ad spend, because I've heard you on different podcasts, has gone up significantly. And do those alarm bells still go off? Like, do you have a process for dealing with the stuff that comes up?
Yeah, it's hard, because you're talking, like, when you step back for a minute and listen to the number again that you're committing to spending, it's shocking, based on old mentalities, or like, what I was doing 2 years ago, like that dollar amount was a salary for the year or something. Yeah. And so it's very jarring when you do that. But if you, again, separate yourself emotionally and just treat it like a business, and you say, okay, well, the total revenue is this, the advertising expense is only this, that's marginal, that's fine. But if you look at it as an actual dollar amount, you can skip a heartbeat or two.
Yeah. So if we're treating it like a business, there's any number of ways we can use the same principles to sell widgets or whatever we want, right? It doesn't have to be books. So why are you still writing?
I love it. I've always loved it. I've always enjoyed it. And I've always enjoyed just reading fun stories and telling fun stories. And the stories aren't done yet. I mapped them out years ago to be very long. So there's probably 23, 25 books in each series, maybe. Just depends. So yeah, I've got it mapped out to be very long, and then I've come up with new ideas. So I genuinely enjoy it.
Yeah.
And I've always been the type of person that, like, one of my favorite lines in Troy with Brad Pitt was, say, "What do you want?" And he says, "I want what every man wanted. I want more." So I've always had that drive to, okay, well, what's next? You've already done this. That's amazing. What else can you do? Or can you help someone do what you did? My next goals now is to work with, a handful of other authors and see if I can make them the next, Shayne of whatever genre they're in.
Yeah.
Or even fantasy, just make them hit their dreams.
Yeah.
And so there's always a new goal. It's not the end of the race. It's just a new lap. So.
Yeah. No, I recognized I did the music thing before writing books, and I recognized at some point a few times, after you get hit over the head a few times, you realize you hit a goal, and it's like, wait, it was the journey that was satisfying. Like,
yes.
I celebrate this for 1 day, 2 days, and then I go into a funk if I'm not doing something.
Yes, absolutely. You got to feed the muse.
Yeah. And so you mentioned you've got 20, 25 books plotted out for each series. And so how many books do you have out right now, kind of total? Where are you at?
Well, like, not counting box sets and stuff like that, there is 33 or 34. No, it's probably more like 38. So close to 40. But then I've got a bunch of irons in the fire right now for new projects. So, so it'll keep going.
Yeah, and some of those are collaborations, right?
Yeah, there is. Yeah, so there's 10 of those are collaborations, and those are more. When I say collaborations, that's more. I help on the business and marketing and more of a publisher side.
Okay.
But then also as kind of a director for a movie, I guess you could say, where I help kind of shape the story, and my co-author Cameron O'Connell writes it, and then I go through and say, hey, what if we did this, or what if you changed this character to do this, or here's where my other 2 series are going. How can we incorporate your books into that? Because it's one big universe.
Yeah,
it's more of a director type role with his books, is where I kind of help spitball ideas and storyboard with him, and then critique, very, very minimally critique his work at the end, and then it's published. So co-author side, it's because it's in my universe and more of a director role or producer role, whatever you would want to call it. But yeah, all the others are me, though.
So, like, what comes up, kind of like, not necessarily in a negative way, but it comes up with collaborating? I mean, there's kind of 2 sides of the fence. There's one, your name's on it, but you're not writing it, so there's like control things maybe. And on the other end, must be hard, at least I put myself in the shoes of, say, Cameron, to be writing and thinking my stuff like the greatest thing ever, right? And getting feedback, right? Like, am I done? Wait a minute, I'm not done, like.
So it is very tough, because creative people are very opinionated, myself and Cameron included. And so when it came to Cameron, he's got an MFA. He did the whole traditional English education, and so he's very knowledgeable on things that I will never know and will never be good at. I'm not a grammar person. I'm not as sophisticated in that sense. And so he has a lot of things that he could sit back and say, why are you telling me what to do again? Because he knows way more than me when it comes to composing, the written word. But then I can say, my whole point was, even without knowing all of that, look at the success that I've hit. And he says, you're right. We both have things to teach each other. And so we're both very coachable in that respect. And that's the only reason I work with him. Because I don't want to babysit someone, and I don't want to work with someone who's not coachable. Because my whole goal is to make that person more successful. So if they make it harder, they're part of the problem.
Yeah.
And so I would only work with someone who's coachable, that can take constructive criticism and improve it. I mean, that's what I did with, my business sense is, yeah, I have a business degree, but obviously I don't know what the hell I'm doing with the book business. So I put myself in a mentee role, in a student role with, Mark Dawson and others, and said, I don't know what I don't know. Teach me.
Yeah. So
I'll make it work.
Why did you start collaborating in the first place?
It was to give Cameron the opportunity, because he had always wanted to write, and he had written a lot, but he had tried doing the traditional model of, submitting short stories and submitting to publications. And although his work was exceptional, it just wasn't getting the attention it deserved. And so I said, well, I've got room in my universe for a new series that's on the East Coast, and if you don't do it, I will. But would you like to? And he said, yeah, absolutely. And so that was pretty much it. I just knew he had skill, and I knew he was coachable. He's an old family friend of mine, and so said, hey, we can give it a shot, and if it works, great. If it doesn't, great. But at least you got a chance to see what publishing is actually like, as opposed to dealing with the BS of New York agents.
Yeah, and I know indirectly more from the music side of having pitched a lot songs and that kind of thing, that sometimes people just aren't like in the decision-making gatekeeping spot, like looking for your voice.
Exactly.
They're not looking for your point of view or your narrative, and it has nothing to do with your quality. Yep. And it doesn't mean you don't have readers out there either.
Exactly. And I was going to caveat my statement there, because I said BS with agents, and it's not the agents that's the problem. It was just there's too many submissions for them to be able to pay attention to everything. Yeah. And so it's just the querying process is very draining. And I went through it and got rejected 100 times. So if I would have listened to that advice, I wouldn't be here right now. And it was that same book. It was Obsidian Sun. Got rejected close to 100 times, I believe.
Well, it must be liberating to realize that I can write in my voice whatever I want, and there are people out there for me.
You have to find the readers, not the publishers.
Yeah.
And that was kind of my understanding, is that, well, if these people in New York turned it down, and none of them turned it down because it was bad. I don't recall any. I think I would remember if I did, but I never got any that said this is trash, or you're terrible, or I never got anything horrible. It was just at this time we can't. And a lot of times they were saying we've already got 2 urban fantasy books slotted for the year, and so it was business. It wasn't a judgment of my story.
Yeah.
But still, that was preventing me from reaching my goal. And so rather than allowing that excuse to dictate my life, I said, well, fine, I'll just do it myself.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to do that for Cameron too, to see if I could help him as well.
Well, one of my meta points is, like, in doing this podcast in general, and when I coach people too, is a lot of us quit or feel the temptation to quit when the submitting doesn't work, or when not reaching buyers right out of the gate. And lacking context or knowledge of what's happening on the other side can be a real liability, because you think it's about you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Everything's about you.
Yes, everything's about you. Once you realize nobody's paying attention, like, wow,
So that was one reason I engaged with the readers so much.
Yeah.
I was telling you earlier, with comments and posts and Facebook or fantasy groups online or whatever, is to let them know that I'm a reader just like you guys.
Yeah. So I'm guessing you would have been content to be successful with a pretty small niche, and maybe replacing your income, right?
Yeah. I mean, my goal at first was to make enough to buy diapers.
Right.
It wasn't anything like it is now.
Right. So somebody might have thought, hey, this isn't ever gonna be like big money or award-winning stuff, right? But so I don't know if it's important to you to talk about, but like, from those external measures of success, like, how are you doing as far as that kind of feedback and validation of your work?
Well, what do you mean? So clarify.
I guess I'm thinking about, like, have awards come up for you, or, you know, are you like in the realm of selling lots of books? Like, how are you doing compared to, say, mainstream
Yeah.
successes?
Yeah. So I was nominated for the Dragon Award 2 years
Mm,
in a row for
mm,
Best Fantasy of the Year. And so that was pretty cool because I got to go up there, you know, beside Jim Butcher and Larry Correia and Faith
mm,
Hunter and, you know, a lot of these big traditional authors. I got to go hang out with them and sit beside them at the
yeah.
same table they are for this, you know, award. Granted, I didn't win,
Hmm.
uh, but you know, the voting systems are a little um, skewed in some of these contests, um, because indies are just starting to enter these,
Hmm.
whereas the traditional, or you know, everyone knows the name. And so if you know someone and then you don't know the other person, you're probably going to vote for the person you've heard of.
Yeah.
But just getting there was great to me because I got to go sit at these tables and speak on panels with some of them, and even some of the agents that declined me years ago. I got to sit
Mm,
next to them at a panel and remind them that they declined, in a nice way, you know, a nice joking way, but saying, "Hey, Indie's legit. Indie publishing is legitimate because you know we weren't able to work together, but we're still here, and I'm doing pretty good."
yeah.
Uh, and so, yeah, I mean, it's gotten to the level now. It's just night and day. The goals that I'm setting now are almost unfathomable to me,
Mm,
especially as of a couple of years ago.
mm,
But I'm not slowing down. I'm just trying to keep expanding and put indie publishing in the respected place that it deserves to be.
yeah. Is there any goals that you're excited about you'd want to share publicly?
Um, publicly, I'm trying to think of
You
something I can or cannot say. So I'm getting into foreign translations. That's one thing
Mm,
that I'm working on. German. We've already got the first 3 books, and so we're going to be seeing how that's going, or see how that goes before continuing. But then we continue rather quickly.
yeah.
There's a couple there's a couple of business ventures that I'm working with right now, in the publishing world that seem like they're going to be pretty incredible.
Mm,
Uh, and then personally, I've got 2 authors right now that I'm working with, on collaboration type co-authoring projects. Um, they're probably not going to be co-authors in that sense. They're going to be more of just me as a publisher helping them,
mhm.
and just kind of manage their work and publish it and market it and do all that. But it won't be a co-author type gig. So that's going to be interesting. And then I've got several new series that I'm personally kind of entertaining working on, but I've got plenty to write in already. So I'm kind of hesitant to pull the trigger on any
Yeah. And
of
does
those.
that, I assume that some of the things that come up around that might be capacity, right?
Yeah,
Like, there's a
capacity.
cost to each initiative you're doing.
Yeah, capacity and quality. Like
Mm,
I'm not ever going to do anything to make a buck over quality.
mm-hmm.
So just because I could write a book and sell it and make money, if it's going to diminish the quality or, just integrity of my writing, I won't do it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's always things I want to do, but there's a limit to how much I can do and do well, as opposed to just slapping my name on a cover. So yeah, I've got a lot of projects that I'm anxious to look into, but um, and then always working on the film angle. I've got some irons in that fire that seem to be going pretty well. So,
Cool.
uh, and when I say film, just any kind of screen
Yeah.
opportunity. So Netflix, actual big screen, whatever. So there's a couple opportunities there that I'm negotiating.
Well, that's exciting. And I know that those markets are hungry for resonating content
Yeah,
that's identifiable. And I'm
you just
sure
have to
that
convince someone. That's the game.
that is the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a quick game. So
So I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about, like, feedback and disclaimers, like, right, like, so you have a style and you talk about your style to your, like, mailing list and
yeah.
audience, right,
Mhm.
about the content of your books, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so, like, what comes up there? What are you doing that warrants a disclaimer or a talking point?
Yeah, so I think in today's society, there's a knee-jerk reaction for people to get too offended, rather than, people are just too fragile in a lot of senses, and I don't think they mean to be, or that they realize they're being that way. So my books have always intended to kind of jostle you a little bit and shake
Mm-hmm.
you up, to get you to think, not to attack you, but
Mm-hmm.
just because I think that if you stumble a little bit on your feet when you read something, it stops you and makes you think about something. And if I can have you look at something in a new way,
Mm-hmm.
from both sides, and say, wow, I actually never thought about that way, or that my position is this way, and just kind of gets you to think for a second, I've done my job. I'm not there to be a soapbox to preach. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
trying to do anything like that. But a lot of people sometimes think that I am, if they
Mm-hmm.
just if they read a comment or read a post or read a chapter, and they think that I'm trying to preach because they didn't keep reading,
Mm-hmm.
or they instantly label me with, oh, this author is this, or this character is this, or and it's like, no, like one of the most common is that they'll say, oh, Nate's misogynistic, or and Nate Temple, and it's,
Mm-hmm.
if you keep reading, it's not remotely the case. The point was to make him look that way, and make him a jerk, so
Yeah.
that he can learn how to overcome.
Right.
And so, but there's people that will just read that and instantly shut down and boycott the whole growth of the
Mm-hmm.
character, which in my reader, as a reader, not as an author,
Yeah.
those kind of characters are when I'd say, wow, this guy's messed up.
Yeah.
He's a bad person.
Yeah.
I wonder if he gets better, or
Yeah.
if he gets worse. And that's
Yeah.
what I wanted to
Yeah.
read,
Is he rewarded for that, or is he redeemed?
rewarded, or is he punished? Like, I want to
Yeah.
see if this guy gets any better, or if he gets even worse.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was kind of the whole point as a reader for me, is that I wanted to hear about those flawed people, to see if they got their comeuppance, or if they got power and became even more terrible.
Yeah.
And so to me, that was always exciting. But I just see these days that as soon as there's a single line that's vaguely offensive to anyone in general,
Mm.
they just shut down and they can't take it. And so
Yeah.
I put that disclaimer out there, just to let them know, guys, yes, it is there, but it's not what you think it is. Like,
Yeah.
just keep reading and you'll
Yeah.
see.
So I imagine you hear from readers or see reviews when people are confronted.
I've gotten one or two.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just started putting that in there for the people that are super sensitive, just so they know ahead of time.
Yeah.
It's, like I said, there's nothing terrible in my books. I don't write anything or horrendous or anything like that. But some people seem to take it that way.
Yeah.
So I just put it there. Like, if you're one of these people, here's a word of warning.
I suppose that mirrors real life, at least in the media realm, right? Like,
That's kind of what
we don't wait to see how people's stories unfold, right? Because we're in the middle of it. And,
That's kind of what I mean. Is it's kind of
Yeah.
a cultural thing these days that everyone's
Yeah.
so frustrated, and rightfully so.
Mm-hmm.
Especially right now, like, there's so many things to be upset about. I get it.
Yeah.
But reading is supposed to take you away from that, not have you still be angry. Like, you're supposed to take a breath and enjoy something new without being tainted by all the other stuff in the real world.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my disclaimer, is, hey, leave your luggage at the door, read this book for fun. Yes, there's going to be bad guys, there's going to be good guys. That's what a story is.
Yeah. I suppose that's part of the allure of writing in speculative fiction versus, say, like more the mystery, thriller, suspense realms, right? There's a little more separation emotionally, unrealism. So for people who want to learn more about you, how can they do that?
Yeah, if they go to ShayneSilvers.com, it's got all my books. There's bio on there. It's got links to all the different stores. There's merchandise, all my social media links where you can follow me. One of the biggest ways to interact with me is if you go to Facebook.com and just search Shayne Silvers, Den of Freaks.
There you go.
And it's if you go there, you'll see, like, there's 8,000 people now, maybe, I don't know. But there's just a ton of super fans in there that, have a good time. They leave their junk at the door, and they're just there to have fun and laugh, and super cool, super supportive. There's been, they actually put together a convention 2 years in a row already for me to come out and meet with a bunch of them and just hang out with them for a weekend.
That's super cool.
So they're super close, tight-knit family, home away from home, which in this kind of day and age with the pandemic crap that everyone's dealing with, it's kind of nice to just have a place to just go
Yeah.
hang out,
Yeah.
have a neighborhood barbecue with a bunch of strangers.
Yeah. If you have a couple more minutes, I saved for the end kind of talking about how we're really dealing with or not dealing with,
Yeah.
this pandemic. So I assume that if there's anything scheduled for you this year, your plans may be disrupted as far as travel goes and those things.
Yeah. And that's something I'm looking at right now is we have one of those conventions, the Friendsgiving conventions that the fans host. That's for July this year. And we're entertaining with all the craziness that, a city government can shut everything down at the flip of a switch. We're trying to foresee anything like that and work around. So yeah, there could be changes that we have to deal with. But yeah, it's messing up everyone's schedule. So
yeah, and like on a more day-to-day level, like what's it been like? Are you able to write? Like what's changed
yeah,
for you?
it's interesting because my office has now been under siege by two little assistants that are very helpful and not very helpful at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. They're both a riot, but they love to knock on the door and slip notes under the door and get in fights and laugh and chase each other on bikes. And so every 5-10 minutes I'm getting interrupted from a very serious fight scene to go help them change their underwear or something, and just little random things. And so it disrupts. But
yeah. And so like what shifts for your writing or expectations in that kind of setting?
So what do you mean, like for the rest of the year or just like
Yeah, we're just like, so you just finished a book and it
Mhm.
was a challenge, and
Yeah.
so I'm wondering how you adapted, like to be able to get words on the page or maybe reduce your expectations about how fast you go, whatever it is.
Yeah, so my claim to fame is that I can sit behind a keyboard and just go
Mm.
20 hours, 18 hours, protein bars and coffee.
Mm-hmm.
That's really all I need. And so I obviously can't do that because I keep getting interrupted, and that snaps me out of my funk.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of my strength, is when I get on a roll, I
Yeah.
really just kind of exponentially speed up.
Yeah.
And so I keep getting kicked off the tracks before I can get that speed. And so it was very difficult to work on this book, not to work on it, but to meet my own standards of
Mm.
deadlines. That
Mm-hmm.
was very difficult because I'm constantly restarting is what it felt like. And so I'd have to spend time going back and reading where I was and trying to get back in that,
Headspace.
the fight scene or whatever it was, trying to get back in that anger state or that happy state or that sweet state, whatever it was.
Mm.
So yeah, the deadlines, I would say just in general, it's going to be harder to hit deadlines. Um, but we'll see. That could change. That could have just been the first book that I was really doing it during the pandemic, and now I'm fine. I don't know, but I won't. Either way, I won't let any of that become an excuse. I'll just muscle through it.
Did you have like a moment like where like there was a flip that switched where you adapted or felt like you could do it?
Yeah, I mean, I like I said, I all these obstacles are always going to hit you, no matter what
Mm-hmm.
point in your career you're on. There's always going to be something that's telling you can't do it, or you need a break, or you need this. There's always going to be someone or something telling you to slow down, or you can't do it because of this. And so again, I go back to those goal cards. Is that's been my saving grace? Is that you just keep beating yourself upside the head with these positive affirmations, and then it doesn't matter what the obstacles are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're going to keep pushing through them either way.
Yeah. And I suppose you don't have to keep writing, but if you do it for yourself, right? Like that's a pretty compelling reason.
Yeah, it's fun. And so I'll probably be taking a slight break. I'll still be writing, but I'll probably be taking a slight break from announcing anything, just to kind of clean up shop from some of the rubble, I guess you could say, from the pandemic. There's just been little things that might have slipped by the wayside. And so there's little business things that I've got to take care of, foreign translations and launching those, and their audiobooks and stuff like that. Like there's a couple things like that I've got to work out. But I'll still be writing. I just haven't officially announced a deadline. After seeing how difficult this last one was to hit. And I want to get to the point also where I'm simultaneously launching audiobooks and print and ebook as opposed to 2-month delay or 1-month delay. So I'm kind of working out all those details right now, and it's difficult because the narrators, they don't just flip a switch and have your audiobook done. They've got to spend 12 to 20 hours doing it and then editing it.
And apparently Audible doesn't always flip a switch either.
Exactly. And then you got to wait for Audible to take 2 weeks or whatever. So, or longer in some cases. So trying to get closer to that point. But I won't be taking a break from actual work. I just don't know what the work will be yet.
And so have there been like any kind of like unexpected gifts or something new that you've gained in the last couple months?
Trying to think. It's been nice to see my community of readers. There's a bunch of, there's obviously 8,000 or so people there, and they're so tight knit that it's really cool because there's been a couple of them that were really severely affected by COVID, and so they formed their own kind of, not charities, but they called it Adopt a Freak, and so they would chip in and help cover an expense or something like that for one of their fellow freaks. And especially like the nurses and the frontline people that were still forced to work. Those people, weren't able to go get groceries or something because they're working, and so we would just adopt some of these frontline people. And then I did the same thing for truckers. I did a big post about, freight truckers and the people who were delivering all of our goods during the pandemic. And so I gave away, I think, 100 free audiobooks, just a bunch of random, truck drivers. So I'll probably be doing something like that again here soon. So just the level of negativity out in the real world versus the level of positivity in the community that I kind of helped create is cool. That would definitely be a gift.
Yeah, I get that. That's super cool. I've been getting emails almost every day that I like send something, a little short story snippet or, share something, and like hearing from people that like, I've had an awful day and this brightened my day. Thank you. Is not, that's not business as usual, but it's a good reason to keep going.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Shayne, it's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I'll stop the recording now.